Good evening. Right now, Metro Police are desperately searching for the person or people responsible for killing a man and a woman.
And I got a male down in the middle of the street.
Breaking news now, a triple shooting leaves 2 dead.
Never expect for somebody to tell you your loved one was murdered.
This Labor Day will mark 42 years that have haunted the St. Cloud family.
30 years. 30 years this family has waited for answers.
A couple months go by, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you really start to struggle with the idea that the case might not get solved and that somebody might get away with murder.
It's very unfortunate that we have any cold cases at all, and certainly unfortunate that we have as many as we do. And that's why Ryan's work and the work of Project Cold Case is so important.
All right. Sorry about that. We got a million things going on, and technical difficulties caught us this time. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Ryan Backman, founder and executive director of Project Cold Case. Back in the office this week after being out of town last week at the SEHIA conference. SEHIA is the Southeastern Homicide Investigators Association, and they host an annual conference typically in November. This year it was in Norfolk, Virginia. Last year it was in Baton Rouge. The year before that, Dallas, and the year before that it was here in Jacksonville. So I am presented at that conference last year in Baton Rouge, and then was asked to be on the board of directors for the Southeastern Homicide Investigators Association. And so this year my role in the conference was that of board member. So while I was up there, I took some videos, took some pictures, sent that stuff back down here to the office to Clint, and he made a little travel vlog of Norfolk for us. So I'm going to let you see that, and then when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about what that conference was, who attended, and the topics we discussed, and some of the cool things that happened while I was there. So take a look at this Norfolk vlog. Excuse me. All right. So there you go. We got to Norfolk last week. Beautiful weather, bright blue skies, crisp little breeze. The weather quickly went south. It got really cold, really rainy and overcast through most of the trip, but we made the best of it. We actually had some snow while we were up there, unexpected. But a really interesting place, Norfolk. Obviously a military town, a lot like Jacksonville is here. On the water, a lot like Jacksonville is here. So there was a lot of similarities there. Their little waterfront there was kind of what the landing used to be and supposed to be. Now it's being torn down as we speak, right down the street from our office. But the waterfront had some good restaurants. Guy Fieri restaurant there. A Blue Moon restaurant there, a couple of good places that we were able to take in and enjoy during the week. As I mentioned before, this was for a homicide investigators conference. The board does this every year, picks a new location, invites homicide investigators, medical examiner investigators, coroner investigators from around the country to come join, network, learn through case studies and investigations what may help them in their work in future. Obviously, cold cases are a big part of that. This year, there was a big push on genealogy. Genealogy was kind of the hot topic this year. We're doing, all we can to try to push that technology forward with opting in, encouraging individuals that have taken their DNA tests through private DNA labs, 23andMe, Ancestry.com. Take those that raw data and upload it to the public databases. That allows law enforcement and opt in to allow law enforcement to use those. Use that information to find cold case murderers, and a lot of times they're second, third cousins, so far away in the family tree that a lot of times the person that submitted their DNA doesn't even know the person that ends up being arrested for the murder. But learned a lot this week. It was a really interesting conference. Of course, met a lot of amazing people. I want to kind of give you guys a little bit of behind the scenes on this conference and who's a part of it and why it's so important and why I personally go and encourage all the law enforcement officers I know, investigators I know to attend. Our board of directors, is made up of really kind of some of the most talented and experienced members in law enforcement. The president is Jen Spears. It'd be kind of hard to point out everybody in this picture. This is most of the board that attended. And it might be easier to just kind of go left to right and explain, who people are and what they do. On the far left there is Mark Dabana, and he is a retired police sergeant. He is a huge advocate for eliminating the stigma concerning mental health issues, specifically within law enforcement, and helping officers that suffer from PTSD, have seen and experienced horrific incidents. He not only is a board member for Blue Help, a nonprofit that helps officers struggling with mental health, but he's a survivor himself. He has experienced a lot in his career and is very open about that and very open about helping other officers. So he's just a great asset to the board to be able to help officers when they're triggered with something, whether we're watching a presentation or whether they just are having a tough time at the office and need somebody to talk to. He's there for people at each conference and even beyond the conference. Next to him is his wife, Galen, that came and volunteered and helped us out. And then next is Alfonso Williams, who's another board member who works with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. He's a new board member. This was his first conference. Next to him is Paige Nealon, who is Paige works out in Sacramento County out in California. She's a deputy sheriff with that Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. She also contracts out with the Sacramento Police Department. She works within the Homicide Bureau with Sacramento County, and was a member of the task force that identified, investigated and arrested Joseph James D'Angelo, who you will know as the Golden State Killer. So Paige Nealon obviously had a big part in that investigation and brought tons of experience and knowledge and interest to the board. Next to Paige is Tiffany Brown, who is a senior coroner investigator for Clark County in Las Vegas. She worked the 1 October Route 91 music festival shooting a couple of years ago. Obviously brings forth a wealth of knowledge that, not many people have had to deal with, and hopefully not many more will. Next to her is our Vice President, Teresa Sprague, and she works for the Orlando Police Department. She's a homicide detective with them. Next to her, in the back there, is Sally Walter. Sally's the executive director for SEHIA and a retired Michigan State Police detective sergeant. She was supervisor of the Kent Metro cold case team in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That team was recognized as one of the most successful multi-jurisdictional cold case teams in the country. They solved 19 homicides while she was there with that. So obviously a good person to be able to bounce ideas off of. Jen Spears is next to her. That's the president of SEHIA. She's the major crimes and cold case detective with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, which is about 20 miles outside of Orlando, Florida. If you pay attention to our Facebook page, you've seen her name before. She and her team solved 2 cold cases earlier this year. One was the 1984 Pamela Kahanes murder. Pamela was a Navy recruit and was killed down in that area. And then that was in March of this year. They made an arrest in that case. In May, they made an arrest in a 1986 case of Eve Aguilar. So obviously, Jen does a lot of stuff with cold cases and has been really good with for our organization and helping us out. Next to her is her husband, who comes and volunteers, Steve. And you see me back there. Next to me is, I think I missed, there's a guy in the back there, Jason. Yeah, and that standing next to me is, Jason's on the board, and next to him is his wife, Kylie. And then on the far right end is Brian Savelli. He's a homicide detective with the Orange County Sheriff's Office down in Orlando, and he was kind of he and I teamed up and worked the hospitality suite during the event. So there was also somebody who was not pictured in there, is Joanna Goldman. She was real helpful. You can see her in that picture. That's Brian, Joanna, me, and Mark, one of the evening events. And Joanna is a investigator for the District 9 Medical Examiner's Office, which is down in Orlando, and she worked the Pulse shooting as an investigator for the Medical Examiner's Office there. So, and there in the middle is Jen Spears in that picture, our president. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of the amazing people. There's Joanna, myself, Tiffany from Las Vegas, and Brian. It gives you an idea of some of the caliber of investigators and experience that are on the board of directors for SEHIA. Obviously that is a wealth of knowledge that we utilize and reach out to, and are really excited to kind of have the opportunity to have those individuals to bounce ideas off of and talk to. The presentations itself, the conference itself, is pretty amazing and very, very, very intense. I mean, just to kind of give you a brief idea of what was talked about in some of the presentations that were in, you can post that, Clint. So the opening ceremonies, as you see there, the presentation of colors and the opening ceremonies Monday morning was immediately followed by a slideshow that Clint put together of fallen officers from 2019 up to the date of the conference, and it was a 12-minute slideshow, and it had around 109 officers that had been lost in the line of duty, just up to that point in 2019. And then another, do you remember how many canines? 12 canines. So it was a really, really powerful opening ceremony, but somber. And that was just, that was just the beginning. Some of the presentations that were given were the Austin serial bomber, which happened back in March. There were, I think, 5 separate bombings and 2 fatalities. And a number of injuries, including a police officer when the suspect detonated a bomb in his car when he was finally caught, killing himself and injuring an officer. April Tinsley case, 8-year-old girl abducted, raped, murdered in Fort Wayne, Indiana in 1988. 30 years later, in 2018, the use of genetic genealogy. Suspect was identified, interviewed, and arrested. John D. Miller pleaded guilty, was sentenced to 80 years in prison. He's already like a 60-year-old man, so don't expect him to get out. But just a terrible case. But again, using genetic genealogy, they were able to identify 2 brothers, and there was, when they started interviewing the 2 brothers, it was quite clear that one wasn't involved and one was. And the one that was, literally, as soon as they asked him if he knew why he was there, he said the name April Tinsley. So it was pretty clear. He ended up confessing and pleading guilty. So another case was the Jamie Kloss abduction. That one's relatively recent. If you remember, that happened in 2018 up in Wisconsin. Suspect basically shot through the door of her home, killing her dad, went through the house, found Jamie and her mom locked in the bathroom hiding, tied up Jamie, killed the mom, and took Jamie, down the road, and kept her basically under his bed for 88 days until she was able to escape. He also pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole plus 40 years. So the murder, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, and got life in each of those consecutively. And then for the kidnapping, added another 40 years. Very interesting presentations on these. Another one presenter was Cece Moore. You may recognize her. She's kind of the face of genetic genealogy. She works for Parabon. She's on all the TV shows talking about talking about genetic genealogy and using that technology to solve cold cases. She put on a presentation that was about genetic genealogy and the evolution of the SNP genotyping, which is what they use for forensics investigations. I got to meet her face to face. We've talked via email in the past, but got to meet face to face and talk to her. So those are, just some of the kind of tragic, and intense investigations that were talked about. There was a lot of other things that were discussed, a lot of other presentations. The conference actually went Monday all day, Tuesday all day, Wednesday all day, Thursday all day, and up until about lunch on Friday. So just filled with topics of interest. Each night we had a event that we kind of invited all the attendees to and hosted. Some of them were sponsored. On Monday night we had an event on the Spirit of Norfolk, which is the yacht that you see here. Dateline sponsored it. They invited all the attendees onto the yacht. We had, there's Bob from Dateline, one of the producers. We had a DJ on the boat. We had catered food. We took the yacht down the Elizabeth River. There's a picture from our hotel room. The yacht was literally, docked right outside of our hotel, so attendees just had to walk right out the back doors and onto the yacht. That was a pretty cool experience. There's the dance floor and tables, buffet. I was trying to find out how big the yacht was on online earlier today, and I could not find how big, but it was huge. I mean, there's three decks, and we had, I think there was about 200 people on the ship, on the yacht. And so that was a really cool night that we got to go out and hang out and enjoy that stuff. The next night, Tuesday night, we had our keynote speaker in an event at the Military Aviation Museum outside of Norfolk. And so that's, really cool. I mean, we walk in and we basically had a hangar all to ourselves. You see the setup, the table seating there, and then the planes in the hangar with us. It snowed that night. We had buses that we chartered that took everybody to the event. Food and drinks were provided. That was our keynote speaker, Morgan Luttrell. If you've ever paid attention to Navy SEALs and the lone survivor situation, they made a movie about it. The lone survivor was Morgan's brother Marcus. They're twin brothers. Both of them were Navy SEALs. Morgan came and spoke to us and talked about some of his experiences as a Navy SEAL and within the military. And so that was a pretty cool and pretty powerful keynote speaker. Again, just people got to just wander around, check out all the aircraft. During certain seasons, they have airplane rides where you can go up and some of the planes that they have there, old World War II type planes, biplanes, which was really kind of cool. They don't do that this time of year, and it was a little cold while we were there. But again, that was just, kind of one of the other things that we provided to the attendees, that, was included in the, in their registration fees. So, that was really cool. The last official night, Thursday night, after a week of intense presentations and trainings and topics, it can be a little heavy. So what SEHIA likes to do is have the last night a catered meal with comedians, and they bring in 2 comedians. We brought in 2 comedians this year. Dwayne Gill is the one you see there. He's been on TV, and he's actually he's a Marine and a retired law enforcement officer from Michigan, and now comedian. And then that was Bubba Bradley there, a good old boy from Nashville that has a podcast called All Things Country. He's a truck driver and comedian. So they were both hilarious and really lighten the mood, and kind of allowed, after a very heavy conference, provided some laughs. And again, if you're familiar with Project Cold Case and you've watched these spotlights and these Facebook Lives, and you pay attention to our Facebook page, you've seen the name Tammy Welch a number of times. That was a 10-year-old girl who was murdered here in Jacksonville back in 1984, and it took almost 30 years for an arrest to be made. And then after that arrest was made, it took another 5, almost 6 years to go to trial. That trial went last year. The individual responsible was convicted of killing Tammy Welch and was sentenced to life in prison. You've heard us talk about Mr. Welch, and Jennifer, who Mr. Welch, Tammy was his daughter. Jennifer was his other surviving daughter. They were both here for the trial. They live in the Norfolk area. So while I was up there, I reached out to Mr. Welch and asked if he had a few minutes to come meet me down at the hotel so we could talk and catch up and hang out. We've become really close since the trial. We message with each other regularly, but obviously we live far away, so we don't see each other. So Mr. Welch there in the middle came down to the hotel to visit, and just by happenstance, one of the detectives who worked the Tammy Welch case when the DNA profile was developed and they found the suspect and made the arrest, who is no longer with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, now works for Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Dave Meacham. He happened to be at the conference as well. When I told him that Mr. Welch was coming, he asked if I would introduce them, since he had never actually met Mr. Welch, but had worked on the case and helped make the arrest in his daughter's cold case murder investigation. So there's a picture of me and Mr. Welch and Dave Meacham from Florida Department of Law Enforcement and one of the investigators on the case. So that was a real cool moment for me and for Meacham and Mr. Welch. We got about an hour to just kind of hang out and chat and talk about all kinds of things. So it was really cool. One of the other things that I think probably is of interest to the families that we serve, you probably saw the Facebook post last week about the playing cards that we did for the conference. I want to take a few minutes to just kind of talk specifically about those cards, what we did with them, why we did it, who we selected to be on the cards, and why. So we're very open that anytime we have opportunities to do something for our families, we always consider it. And we had an opportunity this year to print out decks of cold case playing cards, like you've seen on TV, on the news and media. And typically these decks are placed in jails and prisons for inmates to play with and use and see if they can, if they have any information on the victims on the decks. This was a little different situation. These were not going to jails or prisons. They were literally going in the swag bags of 200 plus homicide detectives from around the country. And so we saw an opportunity here to just remind these investigators why these cases are important. So we didn't put the narrative on the cards like you usually see. I mean, we literally just put, I'm gonna try to get that as close, the victim, the state, the location where the homicide happened, and just that it was an unsolved homicide victim. And we put one of those in every attendee's swag bags, and then we handed them out and sold them at the store as well. So what we realized was that most of the detectives probably looked in their swag bag and all they saw was the outside, of the card, the back of the card, which was designed by Clint here in our office. And it kind of shows the year of the conference, where we had it, some points of interest within the conference, within the city located, and our logo and the SEHIA logo. And that was about it. So I thought, gosh, these people probably think there's just a regular deck of playing cards. So one of the days, Teresa Sprague, the vice president, invited up all the board members to do an introduction before a presentation and asked me to speak about the cards a little bit. And so at that point, I pulled out a deck and actually showed all of the attendees what was in their swag bag. The question has come up a couple of times, who's on the cards, which people we selected for the cards. And again, when we get these opportunities, we have to think through them very thoroughly. We have way more than 52 victims that deserve to be on a deck of playing cards, but we only had 52 cards to play with. So we took the opportunity to feature cases that were in or around Virginia, because that's where the conference was. We selected cases that had law enforcement connections. They were either officers, deputies, investigators, that they had been murdered and their case is unsolved. We selected military because Norfolk is a military town. We wanted to tie back to that as well. And then we selected, we went through the registration, the early registration, and identified jurisdictions that were going to be at the conference, and we picked cases from their jurisdictions to kind of support them and show them that we were helping out their agency and how we can help out. We really lucked out. We had a number of agencies come up to me during the conference and thank me for having their choosing somebody from their agency. They were going into the store and buying multiple decks of the cards. One person bought 7 decks of cards. One person bought 4. They were buying them to share with the family members and within their agency. So our goal moving forward with SEHIA is we hope to be able to be in a position to do that every year and kind of shift the focus. It will not be the same victims on cards next year, and next year the conference is in Albuquerque, so we will focus. Some of the cards will be dedicated to New Mexico, and then we will again look at the attendees and see who is going to be there and try to pick cases from their jurisdiction. We're based out of Jacksonville. We only had one Jacksonville case in the deck this year because we only had 2 agents from FDLE attend the conference. And we didn't have anybody from Jacksonville Sheriff's Office attend the conference. So we only had a handful of actual victims that had been submitted to us from families. We selected a number of cases from the agencies that were coming and their websites as a marketing and goodwill gesture towards them to create relationships and networking. We will continue to do that. Our goal, of course, would be able to get every one of our victims on a deck of playing cards. But remember, these are not the cards that go into jails and prisons that generate leads and tips. I mean, this is really a marketing promotion for us, and it's an opportunity for us to get your loved one out there and for investigators to look at these faces and recognize that they all deserve justice, and hopefully allow those agencies to come back to us and utilize our services to help their survivors and their families in their jurisdictions. So that's kind of the background on the cards. Some people have asked if they are for sale. We do have a few extra decks of cards. We'll probably figure out how many we have and then sell them at our event in January, or package them with some of our other product line that we have, and whether it's the coffee or the jellies and jams and stuff like that. So we're still working on that. While we were there, while we had the hospitality suite open, we did break out a deck of cards and actually used them to play Texas Hold'em, as you can see there. So they were used. Like I said, a lot of agents, officers, and investigators came up to me and appreciated the gesture. And so we've already started making those connections now that we're back in town and working and hoping to help other agencies across the country with their cold cases. For any law enforcement that does watch this, this conference is specific to law enforcement. You have to be a sworn officer or an investigator to attend, be in the industry. It's not a conference that's for families or survivors or anything like that. But for investigators, encourage the investigator on your loved one's case to attend our conferences. Next year, the conference will be in Albuquerque, New Mexico. SEHIA 2020 conference. As the board, we'll start working on that stuff pretty much, in a couple of weeks once we've recovered from the Norfolk conference. But I wanted to give you all just kind of a quick background on what that conference was, who it's for, the presentations that are given. There's a lot of vendors there that offer private lab testing, that offer 3D imaging for crime scenes, networking and database software for law enforcement. NamUs was there with for unidentified and missing persons. So it's just a really great opportunity for Project Cold Case to network and meet other agencies and share what we do with them and offer to help them and their families. And it was a great success. So I'm really happy to have been a part of it and look forward to next year's conference and doing the same thing. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, post them in the comments section and we'll try to get to those this afternoon or as soon as we can. I think we're going to show the remembrances for this week, so keep an eye on those, and then check back with us next week and we'll do another Facebook Live. Thanks for being here.